Hello everyone, welcome to Spoopy Month. Hello everyone, how's Karen and the kids? How's Kimberly doing with her new job at Starbucks? So, after posting my part-time Buggy video like 3 months ago or something like that, and after rewatching said video, I realized 3 things. First, I got quite a bit of support for the video. In fact, this video helped me achieve over 1,000 views for the entire channel, and I appreciate you guys. I would just like to say thank you, you guys are the best. A special thanks to any of you that had an opposing opinion of mine, because congratulations, you are one step further into open-mindedness, and I legitimately applaud you for that. There aren't a lot of people actually trying to get both sides of the story, and I appreciate that you, the skeptic viewer, is one of those people. Second, as it turns out, with my newfound fame, I've discovered that there are people who seem to not only dislike the part-time Buggy video, but also apparently my entire existence. So, I figured that I can respond to some comments on my videos along with some other comments on Part-Time Buggy's videos, because why not? Let's just milk this dude's political views dry. I will blur out names and stuff, obviously, because I don't want you to go attacking people. It's just not right. Now, the third revelation, so to speak, I will address later on in the video, so stick around because I need audience retention. I mean, the third thing is definitely super interesting. So without further ado, let's get on with this educational video essay brought to you by Pure Boredom.
Pure boredom, when you want to do something but too lazy to do anything.
A variation of ignoratio elenchi, or the ignorance of refutation, the red herring fallacy is a counterargument or rebuttal which simply adds statements unrelated to the argument being refuted to divert attention away from the main point of said argument. The red herring fallacy can come in plenty of forms, one of which is known as the strawman argument. As you can see, Part-Time Buggy's entire argument here is that the right wing doesn't care about lives because the amount of children in foster care is at an all-time high. Don't worry, we'll get to the other part in another fallacy, but for now, let's just work with this statement alone. Notice how his rebuttal regarding abortion only very remotely relates to the pro-life argument. Fallacies in general, but especially red herring fallacies, are a form of arguing known as sophistry, which is the practice of making a weak argument appear stronger. At first glance, this sentiment may stump someone. I mean, how could you respond to that? Since most pro-life advocates are Republicans are for smaller government and fewer social programs, and foster care has a negative stigma associated with it, how could one argue against that? Let's apply the same logic to a similar, although admittedly unrealistic hypothetical scenario. Consider the following. The government is trying to make it illegal to kill homeless people, and obviously, the kind and compassionate person you are, you don't want that to happen. So you're against it. Then some guy with Buggy's argument pulls up and just says, hey look man, you can't care about their lives unless you pay for their medical bills, or you let them live with you. If you don't practice what you preach, then you're just a hypocritical control freak. Here's the problem. Just because I believe someone has the right to live doesn't mean I'm obligated to give them a better life, although I'll surely try anyway. It's like if I told Buggy, well hey, if you care about women so much, maybe donate to women's shelters instead of paying for a trip to Hawaii. Oh wait. Okay guys, here's a masterpiece right here. After digging for what felt like forever and almost giving up, I found this gem of a comment. Now, as stated before, the strawman fallacy is sort of like a sub-fallacy or a variant of the red herring fallacy. However, there's one key difference between the two. The strawman argument radicalizes and or misrepresents the main point in order to argue against this caricature of the main point rather than the actual point. This can appear a lot stronger than a normal red herring because he's debating an exaggerated point rather than a completely fabricated one. He says I'm against women's rights, which is simply an oversimplification. The alleged right to an abortion is a rather complex issue as there is no express right for a woman to get an abortion, rather it is an interpretation of the penumbras of the 9th and 14th Amendments in the Constitution. All of that is to say, it is in a very blurry gray area of the Constitution that has many factors tied into it when looking at it in a strictly legal perspective. By saying what he said previously about women's rights, he also rips my comments about single motherhood out of context by implying that I think single mothers are inherently bad, which is simply untrue. If he actually listened to what I was saying in the video, he would come to understand that I was saying that single motherhood is bad, not single mothers themselves. Keep in mind, I know that he said that I think that single motherhood is bad, but he said it right after he said that I'm against women's rights, which implies that I think that single mothers are bad. Just in case any of you needed that to be explained. The ad hominem fallacy. This Latin term roughly translates as "to the person." Basically, this just about sums up all of Twitter, so if you need examples, just go there. Only joking, of course. Let's look at this dude's next comment. So essentially, an ad hominem fallacy or an ad hominem attack is just when someone relies on insults. It's essentially a subvariant of the one I'm going to cover next. Obviously, this type of fallacy never works. Unless, of course, you're Eminem, then you can get away with anything.
That's an awfully hot coffee pot.
Okay, now on to the next part of Buggy's argument. Notice how he says if you cared about human life, then you would have acted in the face of... well, you get it. He's talking about school unalivings, more specifically the recent one in Texas. I'm going to base the premise of his argument on previous comments and say that he is calling for gun control. However, if one looks at actual statistics, it seems that gun control has progressively gotten stricter and yet more unalivings are happening, surprisingly enough. Maybe we should, I don't know, look into what makes students go over the edge rather than the tool they use to unalive people. Bonus round. Time Buggy also makes a similar appeal to emotion in the video when he talks about the Texas shooting and the lack of police intervention.
To be proud of if you live here right now. Here's a country full of police officers who refuse to act during crisis unless the color of your skin is a darker hue.
He basically chalks it up to racism and absolutely nothing else, which makes no actual sense considering all of the white victims the shooter took out. Also, if you understood the law, Buggy, you'd understand just how slimy the police were in that situation. The department didn't want to be legally liable for any deaths, which is why they didn't really intervene, and why they prevented a father with a gun that could have de-escalated the situation from saving his daughter. If you didn't know, the police aren't actually legally obligated to protect you unless they put you in a situation of harm, to begin with, as affirmed in a judge's ruling, Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. This means that if the police tried to save the students and one of them gets shot, the department can get sued and the officer can lose a job. Same is true if they allowed a civilian to go into a danger zone. Obviously. These people were so pathetic and cowardly that they wanted to avoid a lawsuit over protecting innocent lives, and they prevented a willing father from protecting his daughter, which actually resulted in her death. You would have actually had a great case against the police, Buggy, but you ruined it so badly by using the rage and sorrow amongst the American population and politicizing it. Now, speaking of appeal to emotion, a clip from the YouTuber who actually helped me out with this script and my part-time Buggy script, on the other hand, clearly demonstrates my point further. In reference to critical race theorists, here's what he says.
We understand the desire to show the unfair treatment that some people get in society. But on the other hand, I don't like how often people who are pushing the anti-racism narrative seem to paint those affected as victims who are unable to act for themselves. I'm really also not a fan of terms like psychological violence and the spirit murdering of our children. Violence is horrible, and I feel like using violent language to describe the thoughts, words, and intentions of others makes it far easier to justify real violence to combat perceived wrongs.
So I promised the third thing towards the end of the video, and that thing is that an argument I used in my last video was strikingly similar to a fallacy. Editor me will use an epic flashback to show you real quick.
And nothing more. And I know what you're thinking. That doesn't relate to anything. I mean, I'm talking about two different things. You're 15, you're sentient. Well, where do we draw the line? That's my question. When does a clump of cells become a sentient being that's protected from homicide? I mean, personally, I find it easier just to say, hey, at conception, that's where life begins, so why not?
Now, I'd like to apologize for that, even though seemingly nobody seemed to notice or call me out on it, because I don't intend to try to deceive my audience, and I don't want anyone to blindly agree with my poorly articulated point unless they understood what I was trying to convey. Without further ado, here's how you spot a slippery slope fallacy. So the slippery slope fallacy is typically a method of fear-mongering by saying that if one thing is allowed, eventually more extreme things will appear and become more acceptable. Although I didn't mean to do this, I feel that I didn't articulate the point I really wanted to make as efficiently and instead made my argument sound a lot like a slippery slope argument. So, for example, one slippery slope fallacy would be that if abortion became illegal, that it would lead to a domino effect, eventually taking away every right that the women of yesteryear fought to obtain. The slippery slope fallacy is basically a subset of the appeal to emotion fallacy in that it specifically targets fear. Now, a revised way of how I can structure my argument against abortion is that it is hard to distinguish at which of the different stages of an unborn baby's life is it acceptable to kill it. One Once it is already established that life starts at conception, it's extremely hard to argue for killing a human being. Many people make the argument that although it's living, it's just a bunch of cells, therefore it would be like killing bacteria. However, if these clump of cells make a human and it shares the characteristics of life, one of which is having cells, then it stands to reason that it is the unjust killing of a human being. We are all basically clumps of cells, so to use this as a disqualifier is scientifically ignorant to say the least. The circular argument, as the name suggests, is when someone essentially uses the same point to prove the original point is valid, but with different, many times stronger wording. If that sounds confusing, hold on for a minute and allow me to explain. Let's say person A says America is a bad place to live. Person B responds with America is the best place to live because it's better than any other country. Now the argument that person B made is simply two statements that mean practically the same thing jammed together to prove that the other is correct. Likewise, let's take a look at this comment right here. Notice that this guy says that Taylor, one of the people that Part-Time Buggy was covering as one of his videos, is expressing extreme negativity towards women by not offering any positive feedback. Although the comment sounds strong, it doesn't hold any water whatsoever because his argument revolves around making a claim, arguing for said claim by making the same claim whilst using different words, and then using the newly worded claim as admissible evidence. The post hoc fallacy, or jumping to conclusions, is when you make a conclusion without considering other variables involved, essentially drawing from mere speculation. Here are two examples, both of which are from the topics discussed on the appeal to emotion part, which was the school shooting in Texas that was fairly recent. Part-Time Buggy concludes that since the police didn't take the shooter out in Texas and other cops in completely different states have killed suspects that were people of color, that it must be a race issue. That's kind of on the nose, Buggy, even for you. Anyways, the second example, which was done intentionally for educational purposes, was my explanation for why the cops just stood there and did nothing. Although it could be a possibility, it's probably more likely that it was cowardice and a more primal form of selfishness rather than a calculated execution of a loophole, especially considering it wouldn't guarantee a get-out-of-jail-free card, probably because judges kind of have common sense, and 911 was called, which pretty much makes what I said previously void. All of this means I've also given you a red herring. Be honest with yourself, were you going to look into that yourself, or were you just going to take my word for it? Seriously, you guys should independently study things as well, otherwise you're going to end up like a special someone unironically making a movie putting slave traders in a positive light. Ultimately, there's no way to prove their intent unless some documents get leaked. So I suppose that concludes today's video. I'd like to say that I'll be back soon, but the truth is, I don't really know how long I'll be gone. But don't worry kids, I'll come back with the milk. I promised a big project and I will deliver. And for my lousy upload schedule, here's some compensation. Here's a code for a free copy of Fallout 76. Now, I believe it's for PC, but I kind of forgot, so I have fun figuring that out. And in honor for Halloween, here's a code for Dead by Daylight that will give you a cool cosmetic. I don't really remember what it looks like, but have fun with that too. And if you guys like this video so much, I might do a part 2 discussing even more logical fallacies, because you know what? It feels good pretending to be smart for a bit. That being said, goodbye everybody!
Smoker and have black lungs, and you try to say that's healthy because you don't have cancer yet. We know that it is actually factual that obesity is dangerous and it's connected to cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's. We even know it's connected to an increase in birth defects. So there's nothing left to debate. It's not beautiful. It's not healthy.
I think you need extra bump with a hop and a skip and a jump.